Hello and welcome to Redefining Risk, Sanctions, and the Global Battle Against State-Backed Bad Actors. My name's Brad McLean, co-founder for Regulation Asia. Now, despite decades of heightened financial regulation and oversight, recent sanction regimes against Russia have put a spotlight on the world's financial hubs and their problems with dirty money. The goal of our panel is to discuss the opportunities this presents to crack down on money laundering, corruption, and illicit trade flows. Now, lots to cover in today's panel, so without further ado.
I don't think anybody fully anticipated what we've seen in 2022, both in terms of the invasion into the Ukraine itself, as well as the massive and global response to sanctions on Russia. And I think it's fairly safe to say that we are in a new era of sanctions, if you will, compared to where we were even 7-8 years ago. And this trend has been occurring. Sanctions have been changing in nature, over the last 7-8 years, exponentially ramped up in changes with the U.S.-China issues over the last 3 years. But with the Russia program, we're in a new world. And why do I say that? Until Russia was really sanctioned the way it has been, most sanctions programs have been targeted towards very small nation states, right? And your traditional sort of pariah states, North Korea, Iran, Syria. We've never had these sort of massive sanctions on an economy the size of Russia. And that has huge implications for the scope and the magnitude of what banks and companies have to react to and how they apply their compliance systems.
In terms of high net worth customers, I think that, again, another high risk customer type or client type that's always been have a lot of scrutiny on it. But I think in that context where there's a lot more scrutiny is the sort of the facilitators, the non-designated financial businesses, the accountants, the lawyers, the real estate agents that facilitate transactions for high net worth individuals. You've seen it in the US where they've imposed new sanctions on trust companies, and the provision of services by trust formation companies into Russia is now prohibited. You've seen it in the UK where they're prohibiting provided services to Russia, such as accounting services and PR services, and particularly a greater targeting of the real estate sector with the introduction of the register of overseas entities in the UK, where they're really trying to target ownership of property in the UK. Probably a little bit after the horse has bolted, considering that the amount of Russian wealth has already been used to purchase property in the UK. But better late than never, and hopefully that gives a greater transparency.
For instance, in China, we have the city Dandong, which is the border town across North Korea. So whenever we have companies registered or having their address located there, we know some things may have involved North Koreans. But when it comes to Russians, their global footprint really makes financial institutions very hard to identify their trade networks, and they most often use intermediaries to hide their origins and stuff. So for financial institutions, it's really comes down to knowing your client, to know their nature of business and what sort of goods they're flowing through their internal or external networks, and to sort of identify how they might be trying to assist Russia's in evading the sanctions.
We've done a lot of reporting on what we call laundromats, which will be systems set up. We've seen them working for the Azerbaijanis and Russians and Kazakhstanis and whatever at the same time. And you'll have, sort of small time nobody crooks in there with, the FSB and, whoever else. And they're all using the same structures. And what worries us and what we report on is that this global system that allows bad actors to just operate fairly freely that global system is still functioning and still adapting and still growing. Sanctions don't do anything to undermine the system per se. You know, they make it difficult for certain actors. You know, okay, if you're a Russian and you want to buy luxury London property now, it's a little bit more difficult. Fine, but that doesn't mean London's become any less welcoming to, you know, crooks and kleptocrats that want to invest in luxury real estate. The system is still there. You know, there's been some nibbling around the edges. We see, you know, more and more countries are bringing in, you know, ultimate beneficial owner registries. You know, that sometimes they're somewhat effective. A lot of times, you know, they're frankly pretty weak kind of bullshit. And so, you know, looking at it from a systematic point of view, like the biggest challenges, the new challenges are the old challenges. These systems are still in place. So there's anonymous shell companies you can set up, you know, in many jurisdictions. You know, there's fewer than there was, but there's still plenty. You have, you know, in the United States, there's still Delaware, there's still South Dakota and Wyoming and Nevada. I mean, the kind of trusts you can set up in South Dakota, these perpetual trusts that never end and no one knows who owns them.